Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. You're joining the Digital Citizen panel, and the goal of this is to provide a framework for parents and young persons in order to understand our role as digital citizen and how we can best navigate the content with a focus on practicing good cyber hygiene. So I'd like to kick it off with, what is a digital citizen? Antoinette?
So digital citizen is pretty much anybody that partakes in the internet, right? And so we normally think of people that are online through computers and social media, but we also need to remember that there are young people online through gaming consoles and other things. Really, when we talk about global connection, it's anybody using any device to connect to the internet.
Okay, thank you. I know there was so many fascinating topics in this article or the white paper. I was especially drawn to the cyberbullying as well. Would one of you mind elaborating a little bit on what cyberbullying is in regards to the white paper and how you feel about it and how we can help our young people to educate them on it?
I think Miranda has a really good kind of oversight from a behavioral scientist kind of thing. So Miranda, why don't you take that one?
Well, that's more about leaving the virtual DNA, as I call it, the data trail that we all do, and how that affects our moods. So for me, as a data behavior or a behavioral analyst, and in this sense to this topic, data behavior, our moods more or less dictate our behaviors. So how you feel, that's more or less what you do online. You know, if you're happy, you post something fun. If you're sad, you just maybe rant, or if you're mad. And if you're lonely, you search a certain way. So just what I always say is what we leave as humans are the data trail, and in my sense, then your virtual DNA. So I can continue with that for a little bit, because that enters really the next topic of why we do what we do, you know, why your brain is all of a sudden reacting a certain way, and our body just follows, really. So what we need to know is data really are the facts and statistics of our, in this case, online behavior, and they're all together for references and analysis. And those data trails, let's say, that we leave behind, that's our virtual DNA. And we leave that behind by, for instance, searches on Google, search engines, Google, Safari, but also we search for jobs, we search for vacations, we want to translate something, we search for people, even routes if we want to go somewhere. We do so many things only in the search engines, let's say, that the average people uses. And another form of virtual DNA is your voice. People have no idea what we do with our voices nowadays. You know, we all know Google Home, Siri, Alexa, even voice messages on WhatsApp, maybe Facebook Messenger, or even text messages. We now just talk, you know, so we give our phone or our devices our voice to recognize. Fingerprints. What do we do with our fingers nowadays? Or face recognition. You know, we open our apps, our devices. That's all virtual DNA that we give away, that we store in the internet world. Now, of course, our pictures, you know, we store them on our devices, but we share them everywhere, you know, on social media accounts, in text messages, to our friends, like, hey, I'm here, or look what I bought, or, you know, those kind of things. Of course, the likes of Facebook and Twitter, they're almost based, and, you know, they thrive on our likes, because that are our moods. You know, we like something, or we do the mad face, or the sad face, or the happy face. Even the ads all of a sudden come, you know, into your feed, right? You're like, hey, didn't I like something about that or talked about that? And all of a sudden, maybe you talked about bicycles, and all of a sudden there are bicycle ads, or a certain vacation, and all of a sudden, oh, there are those tropical beaches. And even on Facebook, those Facebook groups, like all of a sudden Facebook offers you a group like, hey, I think you're interested in this group. You might be like, you know, you might be interested in it. You like it. Of course, the pictures. We store our pictures everywhere. And another thing that we do with our pictures is the photo retouch apps. That's so hot nowadays. I hardly think anyone has a real picture of him or herself anymore, maybe from their like pets, but that's it. But those photo retouch apps, you know, they even have a server where they store it's your picture, and they are allowed, most of them, to even share or sell your pictures, because only 10% of our people on this globe read the privacy agreements. I have a nice story about that, a funny story. I will come back to that later, otherwise I keep talking. But yeah, that's all those moods and behaviors really are used by data brokers or cyber criminals / predators. And those are just the data brokers, for instance, they buy third-party data, for marketing leads and other cases, but those are the main things. And the cyber criminals and predators as well, they are just searching for people that in a certain mood, and they target them for that reason. You know, so coming back to bullying, people that are already insecure, for instance, if it is a bad a guy or a girl, a predator or a cyber criminal, they will target you on your mood. And I will come back to that later. I will give you girls a bit of time. Otherwise I keep talking because I'm so passionate about this. But the mood that comes with that behavior, that is what the predator is after. And I will explain to you later in our presentation how that works, if you would like to hear that all, of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Antoinette, you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. I think also we need to remember that for some reason, and I'm not the behavioral scientist, but people disconnect from the human element of people when they're online. And this is especially true with young people. For that gang mentality where if they were together in school, they'd be having conversations with each other and somebody would say something mean, you'd be more likely to speak up to it. Whereas online, when there's no real accountability from an emotional connection, people are less likely to stand up to bullies, and they're more likely to kind of jump on the bandwagon. And one of the presentations I did with 4th and 5th graders, one of the terms I found online, which really resonated with me and I used with them, was being an upstander instead of being a bystander. So being someone that stands up for others rather than being somebody that doesn't do anything. And being a bystander, in my opinion, and this is what I try to instill in my own children, is just as bad as being the person saying the words that are hurtful to the other person. During this time of isolation right now, where we don't have the capacity to be with one another and have that physical contact, I feel like there's a even more proponents of young people falling victim to cyberbullying. And as a result, I've read some statistics about an increase in even suicide because of it. So children really need to be taught that the communication and the things that they do online, even when they're on video games and they're talking to one another, like you talked about that, your voice DNA, right, online, when they're talking to one another, I can even hear in earshot my kids that they'll maybe say things that they wouldn't normally say face to face out of anger because somebody didn't do something right because of the game. And I think it's important that we pay attention to this, pay attention to these behaviors, and try to guide young people into understanding that being a digital citizen is equal to being a global citizen, which means that there should be, you should have values that you have in your daily life should also be carried out online.
And that's a new task really also for parents and teachers, you know, for themselves to learn, but also to teach the kids, like, what's different.
Just to go off to what both of you said, I was talking to a friend before this conference. Her name is Frances McTaggart, and she's in the cybersecurity space. And she was like, we were discussing how to teach a kid about the footprint, the digital footprint that you leave. And then we went off of the fairy tale of Hansel Gretel. So you are leaving breadcrumbs each time you go online. No matter where you are in the world, it will always lead back to you. So no matter where you go, the trail of the breadcrumbs will follow you, and we will never be able to get rid of that footprint. And going off of the emotional aspect of it, Miranda, given the fact that we're all at home right now and we are vulnerable, which is a very unpleasant type of feeling that we're all experiencing right now due to COVID-19, there is more opportunity to get hacked and exposed because now we spend more time on different devices and websites and search engines, as you said. And one of the most popular strategies to get attacked by is, of course, falling victim to social engineering. And so, for instance, phishing scams have been really popular during COVID-19 since when people, once I said, are vulnerable or are desperate for more information, they are dependent on the government or other organizations to guide them. And they receive emails or text messages or phone calls for their personal information or that they need to provide some type, as I said, some type of information to receive the mandatory PPEs or to receive funds, and they click on those links, and that's how the hackers get into their systems. But it is based on emotion, and it is based on our human natural reaction to these situations. So just kind of.
Well, and I piggyback off of that, Suzanna. You know, many of us in our work lives, you know, at this point, we're now used to cybersecurity best practices and understanding password protection and changing passwords regularly. But one of the things that I know, you know, I'm probably guilty of it, is overlooking teaching the younger generations those skills. You know, in our businesses and in our work lives, we've got, you know, we've got those phishing tests in place and best practices, but, you know, two-factor authentication in some businesses. But it's really important to remember, as the younger generations are only, you know, going to become more powerful digital citizens for the rest of their lives, we need to start educating them on some of those best practices. And I think, you know, sometimes as parents, we probably forget those things. But, you know, as Antoinette said, you know, they're on, it's not just their phones, it's their gaming consoles, it's their iPads, it's everything. So just being cognizant of that and teaching them those best practices is super important too.
I have a great story from an identity perspective, and I know, Tiffany, that's your background, is identity. Went to our Disney Plus account a couple of months ago, and all of a sudden I see an avatar for a young boy named Trevor, and that's not either of my son's names. It's my son's best friend. Well, he didn't think there was anything wrong with providing his best friend with our username and password for our Disney Plus account. So here I am with the cyber background, and I'm all about, you know, teaching young people in this. And I said, well, why would you do that? And because they're trusting. They trust people, they trust their best friends, they're more likely to give out their credentials. And this is why it is so important to really get to the young people so that they understand. We're providing them with adult tools, we're providing them with access to information. I always tell people, we would never send our young people off into the woods without any kind of protection, with no clothes, with no gear, with no supervision, but we're giving them devices as from birth, right? Like, we have young people, this entire generation of people have a digital footprint from the pre-being born, because their parents are putting photographs of ultrasounds online, right? So they're growing up with a digital footprint they have no control over until they get older. And then on top of that, as young as 2, 3, 4 years old, you see people handing devices to their kids when they're at restaurants to keep them quiet. So they're not accessing the internet, but we've never prepared them as to how to protect their information, how to be protected from predators. You know, as Suzanna and Miranda were talking about, we haven't taught them what private information is and personal information and how that could be used against them. It's dangerous. And also, when they grow up and they become employees to companies, if they're not prepared, if they don't have these these skill sets prior to being an employee, they're also not going to be secure and have these behaviors when they work for a company. And based on the fact that the vast majority of the critical infrastructure in our country and in most other countries are not owned by the federal government, it's up to the citizens to protect wherever we work, right? To protect data, to protect ourselves and protect information. And this really needs to be a movement within the K through 12 space where we start adding cyber hygiene as part of curriculum. The kids are learning about how to use Photoshop and they're learning about how to code. There's all these great organizations, but we're really not teaching them how to protect their privacy and protect their data.
But it's
So I think that's a really good point that you bring up, and I've heard all of you talk about how our younger generation needs to understand how to protect themselves. Can each of you provide some input for the parents that are listening right now as to some simple things they can do day to day to really help protect their children and also convey why that's so important?
Well, it's not really, see, the thing is, during COVID-19, and I'd like to bring up COVID-19 because we're all living through it right now. And it's from my perspective, how I understand it, yeah, we use all these technologies, Google and the video games and Facebook and even LinkedIn. But for me, like as an emergency manager, it's really the information that is being given to us. And yeah, we are always on social media, for instance, Instagram, Facebook, and the news, CP24 here in Canada. And constantly what's going on, how many people are dying, how many cases, that we have to stay home. And there is some organizations and governments are using the scare tactic, but some are using I would say the democratic tactic to portray information. But as the article that Antoinette and I wrote, it is very important to educate the kids. So these kids have these devices, have access to all of this information, but they are not processing it as we are. So we are able to filter it. Oh, this is Fox News. It's probably not, not 100%. We have to do the back check on it. But for them, all of this is legitimate. And I'm sure Miranda will have some facts on the subject. But the suicide rate, not in children, but also in adults, has gone higher. We're all in isolation. We're all processing this information. Some are more mentally stronger. Some are very desperate financially. Some people have lost their jobs, and we're all just sitting there at home processing this information that is coming to us. And I feel that crisis communication has been done well and not so well, depending on which country you analyze. So I think that it's a very important topic to bring up, especially how social media affects us during such a time.
I think for me, one of the things that I like to teach my children along the line of similar to what Suzanna is that when they're online, they need to be aware. They need to be aware of the information that they're putting out there because it's going to stay with them forever. They need to be aware of who they're connecting with. And I try to educate my kids that not all of the accounts that are trying to connect with you are actually people. They could be bots, and that's how this social engineering works. They're kind of targeting people with certain ideas, and it really depends on the age of the child, right? So I have teenagers, and I can have those conversations about social engineering. Young children need to understand that just like when you go to a store and you want to buy something, you have to ask permission from mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or your aunt or uncle, whomever they're with. You have to do the same thing when you're online. You can't just click on something and download something because you feel like doing that. And so that, as they get older, you kind of add levels of information so that they can protect themselves. But parents need to be aware of what their kids are downloading on their phones. They have to enable parental controls. It's difficult. A lot of people are not technical. They're not technologists, so there's a new app every single day. So being involved, being engaged, and talking to your kids about the dangers of being online is probably a good foundation, someplace to start.
Yeah, it's maybe even a subject now that they really have to start teaching in school, creating that awareness. I see still that's lacking in businesses as well. Cybersecurity training and cyber awareness is really something that is not really common yet. So I hope it will be soon, but seeing now all the breaches that are happening, even in like last year, I think the first 6 months of 2019, there were 4.1 billion breaches, compromised accounts. And this year, only the first quarter of 2020, the first 3 months, it doubled already. It is 8.1 billion compromised accounts. And mainly even, they are created or come through email. And yet 10% of IT spending is like forced or used for that, for those breaches, for the creating awareness. Even it starts with making policies that are understandable for everyone, from the janitor to the C-suite. You know, make it understandable, at least make that someone is under, even if it's in, you know, some people, especially people that come, you know, clean your company, usually are just new citizens and have not a fully comprehension of the language of the country that they are in. And it would be really nice, you know, as a boss or as a CEO, that you think of those people, not only for those people. It's a really nice gesture, and you will be a great boss and loved, and they will do something extra, but that is more that thing that what happens in your head. But also because it will help your company, and that's the main thing. You know, it will help you against attacks, cyber attacks. You know, if you make people aware, and also for them at home. So even as a company, you can educate your people, and they can take that home, you know, that information, and teach their kids or their partner and or their family members, and that way the whole population grows in knowledge. But I really think we should start doing that, because people are our strongest but also our weakest links.
Okay, thank all of you for that. That was very helpful. So I wanted to shift a little bit and talk about our dependency as digital citizens, and how we feel like that has altered or changed companies, governments, and universities, their security posture from a technology perspective. Tiffany, would you like to start with that one?
Yeah, sure, I can chime in. You hear me right? Just making sure I'm not on mute. So yeah, I mean, working for a technology company, you know, we're absolutely, you know, seeing a shift and sort of the whole paradigm switching over to the mobile use case. You know, if you look at the higher ed market, for example, you know, you're seeing a lot more in the mobile credential space. And now with COVID-19, everything is touchless, you know, frictionless. And I mean, we're even more and more going to be relying on this, you know, to capture, you know, our symptoms or our temperature or whatever. So there, I definitely, we are seeing sort of a whole shift over to making even more dependency, not on the, just as a digital citizen, but just being dependent on your phone. You know, oftentimes, you know, a college student might not have their ID card, but they always have their phone with them because they're always on it. So yeah, certainly seeing a shift over to, you know, the mobile contactless security posture.
If I may continue, I think this is a very exciting topic in emergency management. So in technology and its impact on making decisions during an emergency or crisis is a popular discussion, especially after we all as a world have witnessed what the impact of a pandemic can do. So I love to read and do research and on the subject especially, and how technology can help. And I found the following potential text solutions for the EM field, and I have my notes. So the thing is, artificial intelligence can help predict, evaluate and simulate incidents to improve response times and streamline resource dispatch processes. So, which is especially important in emergency management, and especially when we are conducting exercises. So if we're able to simulate and then an emergency manager responds, and we're able to use AI to simulate another situations in order to keep the exercise going. So I think that is probably the future for EM. IoT can be used to enhance data collection for the physical environment and quickly communicate this data to different city departments, municipalities, and other businesses that have EM departments, but it can also be used within physical security. And there's also the benefit of blockchain in emergency management, since it can provide transparency. And as we saw and are seeing, we are very as an emergency manager, but also as a citizen, we're expecting to have transparency from the organizations that we work for and the government. And I think we need to apply technology and educate our generation and the younger generation in order for us to keep this progress going, technological progress going, because as Tiffany was saying, we always have our phones, or we always have our laptops or tablets, and ask anyone in elementary school to do a math equation without their phone calculator. Like if you ask them if they have a calculator, they'll just be like, yeah, you know, I have my phone and I'll be able to calculate that for you. So it's really adapting to the younger generation at this point.
I also look at digital dependency. There's so many positive things within the Industry 4.0 and in the cyber physical connection where it's just driving innovation, and we're really excited, and it's coming out faster than the speed of light. But we also have to look at it from the flip side in terms of digital media addiction and how people are constantly, especially now being isolated, we're constantly looking at our social media accounts, LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn for me lately has just been my solace because I want to see what everybody else is doing. But at the same time, I'm finding myself, oh, how many people viewed this and how many people like that? And I never really was that kind of person, and I'm developing into that. So, and we're adults, right? And so young people's brains develop differently than ours do. They don't have that sense of self that adults have at that young age, but yet they all have access to these accounts and TikTok and you know, Instagram and accounts that probably most of us don't even know that they're using right now. And so that addiction, and Miranda, I'm sure you can go on for hours about this, that causes that same chemical response that drug addiction or alcohol or food addiction has. That's dangerous. That's really dangerous. And if we're not setting boundaries for ourselves as adults and being examples for our children, I mean, pre-COVID, going to a restaurant and watching families sit down at a table together and every single family member has a device in their hand and there's no communication going on and they're just waiting for the waiter to come. And it's a sad state of affairs. And we really need to find that balance, right? Understand that there needs to be a balance between our connection online, and which can be really good and beneficial, but then also our connection to one another. Miranda, I'd love to hear more from your perspective on that.
Yeah, well, it's exactly what you said. You know, it's maybe good to know, and I will tell a really short, like small thing about your brain. There is, in your brain is a group of really interconnected structures that's deep down within your brain. That's called the limbic system. You should look that up. That limbic system, that little part deep down in your brain, is really responsible for your behavioral and emotional responses. And what I see, there are really 5 hormones, 5 chemicals really that are active in your brain, that are being used or respond to moods. So your behavioral, your behavior, your emotions. I can maybe go into that a little because I will just mention those 5, but then in short little like blocks, because you will see that you will recognize what you do online or the responses that you get from people who do something online will come from that, and you will recognize, you will be like, oh my God, that's me. So you know, the 5, and we all know those chemicals, you know, we all have heard about it, but we never really digged into them. And I think they're fascinating. So we have 5. We have dopamine. We all have heard about dopamine, right? I call it the rewarding hormone. It rewards you when you go towards a goal. So, you know, you're like, you don't want to do something, but you're like, well, when I've done it, I buy that bottle of wine, or I buy that jacket, or I go on that vacation because I've deserved it. So it motivates you. And even for business leaders, that's a good tip. You know, when you send out a bulk email to your team, like, hey, guys, you're awesome. I know one of my friends, he's a great leader, and he always does that. He has a WhatsApp group, and every day he wakes up and sends them a motivation message. I'm sorry. And I can see that his team performs great. You know, it's a team motivation. It increases their productivity. So that's really a hormone that has an effect on the reward. And when you lack, really, then you see people who have procrastinating issues, lack of enthusiasm. They don't really want to do something, you know, self-doubt even. So that is really a hormone that is for the motivation or lack of motivation, really important to know, because we all use it, especially on the internet. You know, you don't want to make that policy because it's so much typing, but at the end you will see that it works. So they finally do what you all want to do, and it makes your company, for instance, safer. Let's say to trigger it, food, for instance, you know, when you're happy, you trigger your dopamine. You're like, oh my God, it's so good. If I finish this, I will take that meal next time. So even sex, you know, when you're like, when I come home, I want, but that's another topic. Okay, the oxytocin, I just switched completely to another one. And that is really a one that is for creating bonds and for improving social interactions. So it's even known as the cuddle hormone. Isn't that cute? But that hormone is really, it reduces stress and improves your immune system. So examples of it are like when a child is born and it gets breastfeeding, you know, it bonds with his mom. Partners, when they cuddle, they bond more. And again, for companies, when somebody has a birthday and you give that person a gift, you create a bond within your team, in your company. So, but you also see that on the internet nowadays, especially on Facebook or on LinkedIn. You can say, hey, congratulations, happy birthday. And although you never knew those people really, you're really like, oh, that's a nice person. Maybe I'll look into that profile a little more. And then, you know, often a relationship starts, or it's just, whether short or long, but you immediately have a memory of that person that sticks within you. And that was, oh yeah, that was a nice person, even though you maybe don't even remember later that person that you liked was because of, they said happy birthday to you on that day. Well, maybe you were really down that morning, but that person, you know, put a smile on your face.
Lifted your spirit.
Yeah. And what you see, what's really natural is kids, when they are at a certain age and leave home, they are just ready, you know, so that's sort of a lack of oxytocin. And even in the animal world, when they are bred and fed, they really need to get out. So those parents leave them behind. So that's also a good thing. And that's what you see on the internet as well. You know, sometimes you talk with people and it's great. And all of a sudden you lose interest. And that's fine. You know, people just pass by in life, and from some you learn and you continue. That's all great. But you have to be aware of what you learn and who is teaching you something and what is taught. Then we have the serotonin, and that flows really when you're feeling of importance, when you feel that you're significant. And that's quite the addictive hormone. And that's what you see a lot when people have, you know, are a bit of depressed. Even antidepressants are based on the production of serotonin. But when people are not feeling well, or they feel like they need more attention, what you see all over on the internet is selfies, and they want all the likes and the nice things, or people bashing, even in natural life, face to face, about their achievements. So they want to be recognized, you know, they want to hear like, yeah, but you are great. And so you hear people bashing, or they post about very luxurious jewelry that they have, or vacations that they were on, or that boat that they bought. And they just need that attention at that time. So a lack of that hormone, let's say, is really that people get depressed. So you see a lot of people on the internet searching for attention. What predators do, for instance, with that feeling is they go to certain, for instance, I will stay with Facebook. They go to certain groups, find out people that are depressed, and predators go on a search to see if that person maybe has money or if that person maybe looks good, so they can use it. They traffic it for, sexual extortion eventually, because they talk them into a happy mood and they then meet and then things happen. So, but also for financial gain, they just say like, oh, I like you. A friendship evolves from it. And then they say, oh, but I need money, or, those kind of things. What you really see that with on the internet is that catfishing. I think there was even a program, maybe it's still on. I believe it's from Nav Schulman on MTV. It was a guy that once was catfished himself, and he made a whole program about it, and that went viral. So if you don't know what catfishing is, go watch that show. It's hilarious. It's
I think
sad.
Miranda, just not to interrupt you, but I think it's really important to circle back to the point that you were making about human trafficking, because right now, during our current environment where people are just yearning for connection, young girls are falling victim to human trafficking scams at a much higher rate right now as well. And I know that that's something that you're passionate about. And when I saw you post about that, I did a little bit of my own research, and I was just appalled and devastated at the rate of young women that are getting lured into just the idea of leaving home and going to see somebody, and they think this person cares about them.
It starts already with a disconnection at home, as you mentioned. Everyone is on their phone. Feelings are not really shared. So it's really hard. There's a real big gap, really, between, let's say, our generation and the kids, and especially the generation before us and kids. So the communication is almost going like this instead of this. So what you see is and because also they are so used to it, they're going to search for attention online. And you have all those, mainly guys, but nowadays also a lot of girls that recruit girls, but even boys nowadays. People are sad, they are insecure, and they just give you that boost.
They're isolated.
They get a sort of addicted and just keep talking. And that's that serotonin feeling that is stimulated, that hormone, by those people. And then at a certain point, they want to meet you. And something bad happens, and that's really in the trafficking industry. But nowadays with COVID, I also see a lot of small business owners falling victim to being used for even terrorism, or like big organizations, criminal organizations that are targeting people just to see if they can infiltrate, they can use that person for management reasons, to organize a whole crime gang. It's that's a long story, but you see it everywhere. A lot of people fall victim. Even now, I saw a lot of, and that was really well done, but really, really bad, like government and NGO websites were fake. Because a lot of people were searching for help and advice, and especially from their government or the NGO. And they were clicking, as Suzanna said already, on links because they think, I get some information.
That's where they get the information,
Yes, and those websites are really, really well made. They're even existing out of a couple of pages. So it really looks real. And you end up giving your personal information, as Antoinette said, or your credentials. And, they go and do things with that. They take over your credit card, maybe your Amazon account, start buying stuff. It's whatever they need. So emotions really, again, dictate your behavior. And if you're not aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it, people can easily fall victim, unfortunately. Yeah.
So Miranda, I wanted to add something else to what you said in regards to people wanting to feel connection. And I know all of you have said something along those lines, especially during COVID. And now we also have a lot of social unrest. So there's a lot of exchanges going on online around that. But I wanted to add too that we're all struggling to find connection. And so I think that there's so many things right now that not only that our young people, but adults are really looking to try to connect with each other through a variety of methods. So
now you see a lot of online dating sites now booming.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But in the interest of time,
And I don't know if I can say that here. And I think that's a sad thing. Pornhub, very famous. I think a lot of guys know it. It's viral, like it's being used like crazy. And the sad thing is, and that's what they don't know, is that little girls that we also discussed, young teenagers, are being recruited for that.
yeah.
So
That's
you
so
think
true.
that you are watching something, you know, and then it's just maybe someone's daughter, or maybe one day your daughter. And I hope people really become aware of that business.
Yeah. I think that hopefully through this panel, they will become a lot more aware. And I know there's probably going to be a lot of discussion in the lounge after our session. In the interest of time, I wanted to go around to each of you and say we have about just over 8 minutes left. If you wanted to add any final thoughts for the listeners, who would like to start? Okay, Suzanna?
Back to school. So just to conclude, I guess my thoughts is that a virus has no borders, so be it technological or human. And so we must be prepared no matter what comes our way. So the role of an emergency manager, especially during COVID-19, one of the roles, is not only to respond to the situation that is occurring, but it also is to educate the public and promote awareness. So it's like a dual role. We are in incident response, but we're also an educator. So it is very important to really stabilize and know what you're saying and how you say it, because we as humans, we only take in only 7% of what actually matters. So it is very important to keep it concise and readable, and so that everyone, even if their language is English is their first or second language, so that they are able to get the message across. And we are required as emergency managers to also be personable, and not only as people, but as the businesses that we represent. So if we are serving a client or other people are looking up to us, we have to make sure that our message comes across professionally, but also very helpful. So that was kind of my ending point, is that we need to communicate effectively, be it on a digital or personal platform.
Yeah, and I can go next. Just kind of going back to the original topic of digital citizens and educating, the younger generations. I would just say, as a parent myself, if we could all during COVID, post-COVID, focus on, leading by example. So not being glued to our phones all the time, and understanding that, having your kids understand that there needs to be a clear expectation of, if I'm looking at your phone, it's for your safety. Some kids are very private, and some parents probably have never looked at their kids' texts or, their TikTok and seen who they're friends with, but just staying diligent and just, again, leading by example and making sure there's some clear communication, because we talked about some scary stuff that's happening, and just keep your kids safe.
I think that for me, it really, like you said, it goes back to education, it goes back to young people, but we need to take control of our information back. We were kind of lulled into this it's like that saying, and I don't like it, but it's a good pictorial, is, how do you boil a frog? You drop them in cold water and you slowly raise the temperature. We've done that. We've given away, as adults, we already lost. We've already given all of our information away when we joined Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and all of these things, and we started just diarrhea of the mouth, giving out information. Where are we? Our location, geotagging photographs, our birthdays, our address, our vacations, all of that stuff. We need to start taking it back. We have to stop, getting that feeling of addiction and all that. We have to recognize that we're doing it, and we have to take it back. And I think that that's the most important thing, is educating our young people as to how valuable your private and personal information is, how to control it, and make sure that you're taking it back.
Yeah. I want to continue to that more for businesses then, because I've talked about your behavior, and I think, of course, the cyber and awareness trainings are top. You know, they really need to start happening now. But also businesses really need to continue to try and identify gaps and weaknesses and develop an understanding of how long it would take to restore normal operations, and, you know, make what if scenarios and develop various incident response plans so that you're really prepared, not just one, because there are so many types of attacks. And yes, VPN, guys, you know, it's not the time to spread your stuff on the internet anymore, just like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was my list.
Okay. Well, and I apologize, I didn't introduce everybody. I thought everyone had been introduced prior, so that's my fault. So I'd like to start with Tiffany Renz. Please correct me if I mispronounce your name. So Tiffany, and then we have Suzanna, Alsayed. We have Antoinette King. We have Miranda Coppoolse, is that correct?
Coppoolse.
Thank you. And I'm Shannon, Cochran-Izquierdo. So you can join us in the lounge here in a few minutes. I think we have about 4 minutes left. So I wanted to make sure and introduce each of you. And it's not nearly enough time for this topic. There's so many incredible topics within this white paper that we could talk about for days on different topics that are in this white paper. I would love to hear more about the tools that young people are using that parents don't know about, that maybe through your business and security you've learned about. I think that would be a really useful resource for parents to have as we find out what those tools are. Also more on human trafficking and what to be aware of. So as parents are trying to protect their children, really understanding what they should be looking for, what those signs are within their own children and their friends. And
that sounds like some topics for some great follow-up articles.
Absolutely, right? I agree. And,
the white
you know,
paper, the white paper that you've mentioned, Shannon, for the audience that doesn't know, it's the it's called Digital Citizen. It was published by Women in Security and ASIS International, written by Antoinette and edited by myself. And if you guys want to read more, it's available on ASIS.
All right, thank you. You know, another thing that was really interesting to me in this article was clickbait. And I thought, I cannot even begin to put myself in our young people's place, because I know I've fallen for it. It's like you're talking about, yeah, right? We all have. And I see certain celebrities and I'm like, they did what? Oh, I have to read about that. So, I mean, I'm thinking that, you know, role models that our kids are looking up to, or just pop stars and in the music industry and many other industries, favorite movies they have, they're probably clicking on that as well. So I'll be really interested to see how these conversations evolve in the lounge. There's so many different directions it could take, and to your point, there's so many directions other papers could go as well. So I want to thank all of you, first of all, for being part of this panel. It was exciting, interesting, such dynamic conversation. So thank you to each of you. And to those in the audience, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was an honor.
Thank you very much indeed.